So it was an incredibly difficult decision to come to finding a winner over these two debates, because there were some very good speeches and very good points made. I work part-time at a bar, and as you can imagine, lots of people talk about the referendum a lot, and it's fascinating the better understanding everyone had tonight than the general public of Glasgow. Someone in the bar the other day arguing that Scotland wouldn't be able to cope because we have an unemployment rate 4 times higher than England. I don't know where these people get these statistics, but it was excellent to see that these young people who, for so long have been denying guys things like the vote and the right to speak out and saying that, you're too immature to make decisions. Very clearly not true if you have the pleasure that I have to go around and see young, interesting, educated, informed people get some thoughts and opinions of their own matters. So thank you for continuing to back my belief that we should vote a voting, amongst other things. So I'm going to talk about some things that I generally think you guys could all work on, and I hope that you can find some use in this and remember it the next time you're debating. If it does at any point seem like I'm being harsh by being like, do more of this, do less of this, it's not because you're all like terrible. It's just generally because you're at a level where obviously you're all competent, confident speakers who are good communicators. You all appear to have very good grasp of the issues. I can only imagine the only way to get better is for me to tell you what you're doing wrong. You have parents, presumably, who can tell you what you're doing right. That's their job. So I pat you on the back. But it's my job, wonderfully, to tell you how bad you all are at certain things. No, so one thing that certainly comes up is to try and moderate, for some of you, your pace and timing. You're never going to be able to say everything you want to say in a 5-minute speech, and that's okay. But bear in mind that, as a judge, I don't have perfect recollection, so I am taking notes. On top of that, regardless of whether you have an accent or it's a microphone, just speaking very fast sometimes makes it hard to follow. And you'll often find that if you slow down, you can convey the same sort of ideas with perhaps less words. As well, if you're speaking a bit slower, you maybe have less dead words, such as or and you'll develop your own specific dead words as you go on in your debating career. Mine's is right. So often when I'm in a fight, I'm giving a speech, right, what I write, I think, right. Calming down and slowing down can often be very useful, and it won't lessen the impact of what you're saying. So keep that in mind. I understand that for a lot of you, it's just a nervous thing, or when we are nervous, we tend to speed up. That's very natural, practice will make that reduce. And recording yourself and listening to yourself can also be a very good way of doing that. Just keep pace in mind. As well, to go along with that, structure is very important in debating. It can feel very arbitrary when you first start to give public speeches to say something like, my first point is going to be the economy. My second point is going to be about international influence. My third point is going to be the scaremongering of Project Fear or whatever. Because it feels like there's less sort of flow and depth to this. Like, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? Be clear and decide when you go up there, I'm going to have 2 or 3 points, I'm going to headline them at the start, using fingers, be simplistic, and I'm going to stick to those headlines and make the judges aware I've now finished my first point, I'm going on to my second. Reasons for doing this. Firstly, it's clearer in your head, because you know where you are in your speech, and it also makes it easier to keep time, because you can plan, I'm going to go on to my second point and say 2 minutes, 30 seconds, and that way you don't spend your time rambling and then realise you're running out of time, which is an issue for some speakers. It's also, we often forget that we're judging this based on notes, largely, and it's a lot easier for us to make clearer notes if you're like, this is my first point, this is my second point. So that just sort of a debating thing, when you're doing competitive debating, structure can be very useful. The second last thing is the idea of, I'm going to call it, nailing stuff down. A lot of the time when we're debating, we talk about vague bourgeois concepts such as democracy or freedom or individuality or international influence. Often it can be very good to sort of say why these things are good or why I should care. So, when we're talking about benefit to the majority of Scottish people, what sort of benefits come from international influence? Or what sort of benefits come from a more democratic presence? or what are the harms of having a government that doesn't represent us because we only send 59 out of 650 MPs or whatever it is. So instead of just sort of using very vague terms like more democratic or more influence, try and give that argument, but then nail it down to being like the problem of a lack of international influence is, trade policy, etc. And some of you did that, by the way. Many of you did. It's not to say that all of you totally messed up. But in general, throughout your dating career, you'll often find that you're making some big arguments, like freedom, but try and tell me why this sort of freedom might be good. But lastly, on the general thing, and this is really key, please always remember that debating is a comparative sport where you are either comparing a hypothetical future when you've done whatever change the proposition is advocating versus the status quo, or in this case, you're advocating one of two hypothetical futures of what Scotland will look like in 11 years. So, as well as saying, this is what we think it will look like and this is why it's good, or this is what we think it will look like and this is why it's bad, remember to then contrast that with your own side. So if you were opposition to it, you shouldn't just be saying, so under propositions mechanism, X will happen, Y will be bad, Z will be terrible. After saying that, perhaps say, contrast this to what we think the likely scenario is if we are part of the Union still in 11 years, and vice versa. Proposition made some points in both debates about the EU. Bear in mind, and this was mentioned again, talking about the likelihood we won't be part of the EU in 2025 if we're part of the UK, because there's an overwhelming likelihood that the Conservatives and the UKIP will get in. We have a referendum, currently 55% of the UK citizenry doesn't want to be part of the EU. So it's contrasting the likely status quo in the event, the likely hypothetical future of a no vote versus a yes vote, as opposed to just saying, this is what will happen under a yes vote, this is what will happen under a no vote. Always comparing the two, and that's fine for any debate. Remember, don't just advocate, this is a good idea in general, this is better than the status quo, or this is worse than the status quo, is what you always want to be arguing. So I hope that sort of general stuff is good, and if you need any further clarification, or if any of it was unclear, or you want just more general feedback, please feel free to come and grab me. Claire and I are in a hurry to get back to Glasgow, so we can hang about, probably. Or I can hang out. Let's go. So I'll just briefly go through and sort of say probably one thing I liked about your speech, one thing I didn't. I don't want to get bogged down, and I'm aware that presumably some of you have to go home at some point. So I think this is starting from the first of the Samantha. Samantha, excellent. So I think that you're very, very confident, and that was excellent. And it's hard to open the debate. So well done. Sometimes people get up, and because we're first to speak, we're not sure how loud or how passionate to be. Just be whatever you want is my response to that. Samantha, you're excellent. My only one thing would be, often judges will talk about analysis and not quite make clear what that means. When we look for analysis in debating, which is one of the criteria we often judge on, what we really just mean is backing up claims you make. So when you talk about own solutions to own problems, and this goes for any point really, all points in debating almost follow the exact same mechanism, which is the proposition, like the motion, will lead to this thing. So you're just arguing that A is going to lead to Z. This House of Ban drugs might be a motion, you want to argue it will lead to more people taking drugs. The motion A will lead to the consequence Z. That's what almost all points will always look like. What you need to do is try and take the most logical series of steps to get from one to the other. So don't just stand up and say, this is, we do not want to ban drugs because we think, we do not want to legalize drugs. Drugs are banned. We do not want to legalize drugs because we think more people will take it. That's what we would call an assertion. What you want to say is so we think that if you legalize drugs, you take away disincentives to take drugs, as well as making them subject to advertisements or popular culture, etc., etc., etc. And then giving reasons like that. Within your speech, Samantha, just asking yourself why and how questions were outlined on the notes. We want our own solution. We think it's better to have our own solutions to our problems. Why is that the case? Because Scotland is fundamentally different. How is that important? Why is that important? And peeling back the onion, humming layers, all these sort of generic terms used. But just asking a bit more why and how, and that goes for everyone, but that was the only thing, because very confident, very good points, very, very impressive opening speech. And Charlie, because I can't see Charlie, right, so I think that this is a similar thing to Samantha, is that you made a lot of claims. So you talked about, the mutually exclusive nature of joining the EU, keeping pounds, the power, of leaving the UN Security Council and stuff. What's very important is, instead of making a lot of claims, try and think of a general point and explain, as I was talking about with the sort of layers, why this is relevant. So saying, for instance, in general, lack of influence, and talking about why influence is important and all the different ways this might occur. And just, again with the structure, just headline points, because it felt often that you're firing off all these great ideas, and they were great, but they felt non-sequential, if that makes sense. They were just, I've got ideas, try and nail it down, because the stuff you were saying was excellent. Daniel? Yeah, excellent style, Daniel, really good ideas. Some good POIs as well, which is always impressive to see. The rebuttal was also excellent. I think, once again, it was clarifying exactly what you meant. So the first point was in economics, and you pointed out that the UK management of pensions is terrible. That's probably true, but it's bearing in mind of, you don't just want to say, well, we messed up in the past, so we'll mess up in the future. That's the thin logic. You want to say why it's a systemic problem that they will mess up in the future, and why this will be categorically different under Scotland. So that's just a general point again. Always bear in mind that you don't just want to say, they did this, so we'll do it again in the future. You have to be like, they will continue to do this for an actual reason, as opposed to what you were talking about, just an example. But confident and good points. So well done. Alex, bear in mind I'm running out of time here. So I think this speech suffered from having lots of good claims that were somewhat assertive. So for instance, you were talking about capital flight would happen, and there'd be uncertainty over currency, and transaction costs would occur, and that would cause large companies to leave. But just trying to walk me through a bit more step by step this is. So bearing in mind that we're just average voters, what is the process that companies go through in deciding to set up an office? Where might these companies go if they don't want transaction costs? Someone might have just sit down and be like, well, if transaction costs are a huge problem, then companies would never be international. So how does that work? Just explaining why capital flight will happen, why specifically the sort of thought process that goes through the minds of either the super rich or the companies, why they want to leave. So just making sure that these claims you make, you explain the thought process and the steps behind the decisions that these companies or these people will make. But again, very good claims and relevant, and probably have some merit in this debate and need to be talked about, which is excellent. Samuel? So I think, Samuel, the main thing about summation speeches is to make sure that you're being very responsive to what's being said. So the best sort of formula for a summation speech is to say, pick something that everyone's been talking about, the economy, and say, okay, so our side has made the claim that our economy will be better, their side has made the claim that the economy will be worse. Here's my thoughts on the sorts of things we've been talking about. Now, generally in summations, you don't want to give a lot of new material, but you do want to give your own thoughts on what's already been occurring. So, with the economy, just tell me what, your thoughts, don't tell me but, tell me what's going through your mind on the economic stuff, and try and respond to what's being said by opposition. Just, a lot of summation is being a really good listener. So the stuff you were saying was very, very good. The only slight problem I would say if it was a bit repetitive of what your partners had said, which is something you do have to do in a summation, but if you contrasted what they said with what the other team were saying, and were able to give why specifically those arguments beat these arguments, it becomes a much, much stronger summation. And Sarah, very confident and very dry style, which I really enjoyed. It's good to see people feeling comfortable in giving their own sorts of speeches in those sort of style. I thought that like the sarcasm that you employ shows that you're not trying to imitate another speech, you're just giving your own thoughts, and that was really good to see. And it was a very enjoyable speech to listen to. Similar things with Samuel, try and give a genuine comparison and clear structure. These guys have said this, we've said this is what I'm doing. That's what summation speeches should really look like. Proposition said X, opposition said Y, we went for 1, 2, and 3. Simple structure. Do I have time to go do that for next week?
Please, just
I just don't want to keep you all here if maybe I'm boring, I don't know. It's a cool. No, I'm not. I'm really interested. Right, so Rebecca from Lithgow. Right, so Rebecca, again, very good and strong, confident debate. The thing I would focus most on for you is sometimes I felt that you had like so many ideas and so many things to say, and they were like coming out at such a pace that it was at times a little bit hard to follow. So try and have a very clear structure in your notes, and either like go a bit slower or record yourself or do whatever you need to do to make sure that you know which ideas are coming at which point, and you can kind of go through them one at a time and make sure that you stick to that. For me, I like to have big notes, like big A4 sheets of paper, and I'll have, say, a different bit of paper for every point, so I'm very clear where I am in my speech. But you said so many relevant things, so well done on that. And you said it all very well, it was a lovely style. It's just, I think just making sure you're a little bit clearer would have gone a long way. Scott, this one, I think that again, you kind of fell into the trap of not totally explaining what you mean, and also doing sometimes what's called debating by example. So, for instance, you talked about how large economies are more stable than smaller economies. You gave the examples of Iceland and Ireland. What you always want to make sure, and this is very general for debating, is don't ever use an example to make a point. Make a point and then back it up by an example. So explain to me why it is that smaller economies are in general hurt by recessions, and then say, and we saw this like Ireland and Iceland, rather than rushing to your example. And in general, as well with the whole thing we talked about backing up points by saying like our economy will be controlled by international businesses, explain why that is and then make that claim. But like good points, good claims, some you were obviously listening because your rebuttal was relevant. Very good structure actually, probably one of the best structures that I saw tonight. Very clear, like 2 points, highlighted at the start, my notes for you were very clear, so that was good because I knew exactly what you were saying. Anna, yeah, again, this is quite a clear speech as well. 2 obvious points: immigration and EU. I think possibly timekeeping was a slight issue, or sort of happy with it, because it felt like you had a lot more to say on the EU point than the other 2 things. I'm not sure that was generally true, but if it is with the immigration point and with the NATO point, they both need to be fleshed out a little bit more. They're a little bit shorter. So just asking yourself like, why it is that immigration is so important, and as well, the contrast or the comparative, why it is that immigration can happen or is less likely to happen, or will be worse if we don't vote yes, because you start saying immigration is important and immigration is good, but someone could have stood up and be like, well, there's not immigration, that's part of the UK. So you needed to explain like, well, actually the UK is full of people who are against immigration, and that's why we keep voting UKIP, and that's why we're more likely to have better immigration under Scotland, something like that. Possibly there's a more offensive, less offensive way of saying it. Great man, Gavin. Excellent, Gavin. Clarity was a big thing for you, and maybe like calming down a little bit. I think that your rhetorical style is excellent. So like, I don't mean lose like your passion. Like your passion can definitely stay, because it was great to listen to, and it was a really enjoyable speech. But I think that for someone who clearly had like a bajillion ideas and like a lot of really interesting points, I really liked the turning of majority point. I think it's very clever. And you had a lot of good examples for international influence, G8, UN Security Council, embassies, trade, like loads of really good stuff. When you're trying to give a lot of complex ideas in a short space of time, all the rhetoric has to be manufactured. So this is going to sound strange, but we shouldn't know this. So maybe it's true, but I got the feeling that your passion was genuine. If you're giving a speech, your passion has to be completely manufactured, because in your mind, you have to be completely calm so that you can maintain your structure. So that was kind of the thing with you, of a little bit clearer structure and a little bit more calm would have conveyed the points. So use your passion and your rhetoric sparingly to really emphasise points, but don't have a whole speech as like at the same sort of passion and rhetoric level, because it will make it harder for you to be as clear as you could be. So it was a very, very good speech. Just like keep at least in your mind clarity, because it felt like at times you were letting it all come out, and there was a lot of stuff to come out, and it needed to be condensed. But it was great stuff talked about. A lot of your stuff was really interesting, so it was a very good speech. Last two speeches. Ethan, in this summation. There you go. Again, excellent summation. What I think the main problem with this was, it wasn't as responsive as it could have been to the stuff that the opposition were claiming. So like a lot of the stuff you were saying about like pensions, NHS not being affected in Euro, this is stuff that comes out in a lot of independence debates, but it hadn't been the main points of the opposition case. Like Gavin had been making different claims about tyranny of the majority, UN Security Council membership and stuff, and similarly Scott had been making more claims about the general nature of large and small economies. Just making sure, and this is what makes the nation so hard, because you can't write much of it before you go up, because you've really got to react to the debate that happened. So just listening a little bit closer to what you thought their main arguments were, and thinking, what are the judges going to be crediting them with, and how can I take that down? But like the stuff you were talking about, you spoke about very well, exceptionally clear, great structure, obviously had a clear understanding of the issues. So it was a really good summation. I just think the problem was you took down more of the minor points, and didn't seem to realise what you really need to take down. So just a tactical thing, so that comes with experience. And last but certainly not least, Duncan, absolutely excellent summation. I probably would tone down the sort of doomsday rhetoric that you started your speech with, like, the markets will have crashed, right? Because I'm just saying that, no, they won't have done. Like, I can buy, although I don't personally believe it, that Scotland's economy might be hurt in the event of a yes vote. I don't buy that we're going to be like a third world nation, which seemed to be where the speech was heading at the start. So just give me genuine case. And I understand that like rhetoric can make a speech interesting, but it's probably you're probably better off doing that by repeating what the opposition have said, in your case the proposition, in a rhetorical voice and making fun of them, than you are sort of giving an overblown claim of your own, which was a little bit strange. As well, make sure to back up some of your claims, like, for instance, the idea that we need capital to unlock the oil. It's very true. Then you just kind of said that people won't invest because of our unsure economy. I mean, I felt that someone could have stood up and be like, I think we'll be able to find someone who's willing to invest in oil, given it's such a good commodity. And just like make sure that those sorts of claims you're really cementing into the ground, like, why is it that our economy will be so unstable that a company would not come in? And the way to do that, I think we're chatting a little bit earlier, what is the thought process a company would go through when it makes these sorts of decisions? Like, how does a company decide to invest? And walking you through those steps would have made it a little bit clearer. But nonetheless, very good summation, some very good points, and some of them were very well explained. Hit on the right, the main ideas when coming in the debate. So this is what I want to see. I hope that is useful, and I hope you can take it forward. If you do wish to chat to me, or any of my judges, heavy egotistical, or any of the other judges involved, please do so. We all have very interesting thoughts on it, and I'm sure we're all happy to help you as much as we can. Thank you once again for what was an excellent debate. So ultimately we thought that there was all teams were considered, and it was a very difficult decision, but we felt there was one team in particular who made a lot of very impactful claims on either the harms or benefits, we'll see in a minute, of what this would be. And they explained these claims a lot better. They listened to the other team and gave genuine responses, slightly better than everyone else did. And they were stylistically fantastic as well. And so for all these reasons, despite all teams doing wonderfully, we decided that the winner of tonight's seniors competition is the team who were opposition in the second debate, Craigmont.
Congratulations everyone. I just want to finish the evening by thanking people who've come to observe and participate and ask questions and make points, and to say a word of thank you to the Gorey family who've sent up the trophies and made sure the debates could happen. My sense going round at the teas and coffees was that people want this to happen again, and we hope that you'll come back next year and participate again. Thank you very much. Congratulations to